My number five for you, I'm guessing probably ranks a little higher on your list, just given with what I can see behind your TV. All right, and here we go. We are rolling. It is time for another episode of Cash's Top 5. And I say this quite a bit. We got a fun one on deck. I really mean it this time. And you can tell we have a fun one on deck because you can see the ornate background behind my guest today, Elizabeth Choi. Elizabeth, how are you doing, dear?
I'm doing really well. I don't know if
yeah.
Okay, we'll get to that later. Okay.
Yeah, we got to definitely show off some stuff there.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm totally geeking out about our topic and like even being invited to discuss such things.
Yeah, we chatted about it and we kind of bandied back and forth like what kind of topic do we want to do, and obviously I'm in the radio world, and I learned this about you. I didn't know you were such a music hound and a big fan of what we're going to be ranking today. So go ahead and tell everybody, what is our top 5 for today?
Top 5 bands of the 90s. And can I
so hard. It's so hard.
There's so many good ones, but let me just kind of preface this. Like almost everybody I know, friends, family, they tell me I have terrible taste in music. So like from an expert standpoint, I don't know how qualified I am to weigh in on music, but I do like music. It's a big part of my life. My mom, she sings country music. She sounds just like Tanya Tucker, and her brothers are in a band. And so like growing up, we were constantly going to their gigs and things like that. Love music. Always have it. It's what motivates me at work to be creative. If I'm out jogging around, always have music on. But as far as my taste, it's questionable, Cash.
So, well, I'm curious now. The friends and family who give you crap for your taste, like, what do they listen to where they're like, why are you? Because we're ranked 90s bands. Some of the best music. Obviously, it's a generational call between you and me, but 90s music rocked and was really good. So I'm curious to see what they like to where they're questioning your call.
Okay, so my brother, he's a couple years older than I am, and growing up, he was like the epitome of cool. If David Choi did it, then it was I automatically wanted to do it because I wanted to be cool like him. Mm-hmm. He listened to things like Jane's Addiction. I think he listened to the Pixies, things that not everybody really knew about. And so I'm listening to the stuff that's on like X103 and stuff that's getting radio play. And to me, that's cool. But they're more into stuff that you may not have heard of.
Oh, God. David Choi, the original hipster. And they're great until they make it big, and then they're no good anymore.
Right. So, and then my sister, some of my older sisters, they were really into hip hop. My sister Amanda in particular, she was into hip hop, and she would listen to stuff. I don't even have names for the artists, but like we go out dancing in my 20s to the clubs and things like that. And I may request like some Ja Rule and J-Lo, and she's just like, no, that's. You listen to hip hop?
Oh yeah, and I feel like you and I are going to have some great picks because I was shaped by the radio as well. Anybody who wants it's okay to like some mainstream stuff. I get some crap sometimes because people think, oh, I'm just if it's the number one pick, I like to go against the grain. I like to be the dissenting voice on some topics, especially when it comes to movies. But radio was huge. When we grew up, I think you're just a little older than me, but pretty similar generation where you grew up. We were also definitely part of the same generation where when we were kids, we weren't calling the shots. We were still in the generation where we just did what mom and dad told us to do. So when you're in the car, we're listening to what they want to listen to. If we go to the store, we got to go where they want to go. So top
and what
40,
did that mean? What did that mean for? Because we like when it came to like Nirvana or Pearl Jam, my mom she was not cool about that at all. It was always Elvis, Tanya Tucker, and more Elvis. I can't tell you how many times I've been to Graceland. It's almost embarrassing. Like all of my friends are going on these cool Florida beach trips for spring break, and we're going to Memphis again.
So that's really funny. I've actually never been, so I will have to get some tips from you for the first time I go. I kind of lucked out. My mom is a huge music head, like just loves all kinds of stuff. Classic rock is probably her bread and butter. So a lot of Zeppelin, Aerosmith, Tom Petty, Fleetwood Mac, and she likes stuff that makes you dance. So a lot of Stevie Wonder, Bill Withers, a lot of soul. So she had a lot of stuff. So I always end up having to listen, like when we go on road trips out to the family farm or driving around town or whatever, or even being at home, it was a lot of listening to her CDs. My dad loves Jim Croce and whatever's on Top 40 radio. That's it. Jim Croce and Top 40. So I grew up in his truck with him, like listening to No Doubt when it was brand new, Britney Spears when it was brand new, like that mid to late 90s. If it was a radio Top 40 hit, I loved it because I heard it all the time with my dad. And he's about to be 65 this year. He still listens to Top 40 radio. He's like, hey, did you hear the new Ed Sheeran or the new Taylor Swift? Or he loves the new Ariana Grande. Like that's him.
I think your dad and I would get along.
Because
that's kind of where I learn about all of the music that I listen to is just by tuning into the radio. I'm old school. I'm old fashioned.
Well, let's go ahead and dive into it. I love, again, I'm going to shout out the background because I haven't had anybody do this yet on the show. You have an actual shrine built and you've got the garb on, you've got the 90s grunge look.
I was actually out jogging before I sat down to do this. And so I had, my jogging clothes on and you can tell my hair's still up. And I'm like, okay, I got to get like in the mode for this. We're talking about 90s. I love early 90s, love grunge music. And so and I'm like, oh, flannel. Yes, that's what I'm going to put on. So yes, thank you for noticing. Let me grab. We'll get to all of that, but I kind of had to show something off too. This is kind of doesn't really fit into the mix. But this is my New Kids on the Block card collection.
Oh, wow.
I bet you this is worth money. A whole collection. We'll get into that later. But I just want to say I got to dance with my second favorite new kid. And I bet you don't know your new kids.
I know Donnie. I know Jordan.
Donnie, the bad boy.
Yeah.
Jordan's my number one. Donnie would be my number two. And I got to dance with him at what is Deer Creek now?
Just call it Deer Creek. It's
Deer Creek. Okay,
Ruoff Music Center. It's Deer Creek.
Is it Ruoff? Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to call it Clips, but that's before Ruoff. Yeah. Okay, so they announced that they were reuniting and they were going to go on tour. This was probably 2009-ish, 2008. And one of my girlfriends who worked at a TV station here in Indy got us some VIP tickets through work. And we sat in the pavilion and they had sort of these B stages set up throughout the pavilion. And Donnie, he pulled her on stage and I felt it. It was just intense jealousy. And then he looked at me and grabbed my hand too. And so we both, and it's on YouTube, so you can verify this, but we both got to dance with Donnie and he was her number one. So it was even more special for her.
Yeah.
And my number two new kid.
Oh my God, that is amazing. Well, I saw the binder. I couldn't tell if it looked like it was backstage passes, but it's playing cards or trading cards.
It's a whole
bunch of
and it actually is. Here's our VIP tickets from that night, and just kind of memorabilia, our bracelets to go backstage and that sort of thing. And, yep. New Kids on the Block was my first love when it comes to music. Well, okay, Elvis maybe, because that's what my mom was always listening to. And so Elvis, then New Kids on the Block. And then I got old enough to develop sort of real taste in music. At least I'd like to think it's real taste in music. So
sure. Yeah, you could maybe mix in some guitar and some bass and all right.
Less dancing.
A little less dancing, but still there's a place for that. We were kind of talking about that before
absolutely.
we started. All things can exist. Both can exist. So
I would agree.
Let's kick it off. Elizabeth, we're doing our top 5 90s bands. Who do you have at number 5?
Okay, well, you just mentioned this band's name, and this is probably going to make me seem extra lame, just like your dad, but I really like No Doubt. I loved Gwen Stefani. I love Gwen Stefani. I actually met her a couple times too. And have her autograph. Oh, I forgot to put my autographed Gwen Stefani t-shirt behind me. I do have that.
That's pretty cool.
Why do I like No Doubt? Because they don't take themselves too seriously. They're fun. Gwen Stefani is just absolutely stunning and fun to watch on TV in concert. I've seen them in concert. I like their No Doubt, the band stuff. I like her solo. Just a Girl always gets me motivated when I'm at the gym or just need to get pumped up for whatever reason. I like Gwen Stefani did a song with Adam Levine at the Grammys called My Heart is Open. And I just thought she was stunning. The song was just lovely. It did not get good reviews. This kind of goes back to my point when we first started this, that my musical opinions are not always respected. I tend to like things that either people really don't like at all, or it's just like, okay, of all the great stuff, that. So maybe this is an example of that, but I like No Doubt, and I love Gwen Stefani.
Sure. Yeah. It's been a rule of mine for many, many years now to just say, screw the critics. The critics are going to, hate certain movies, or they're going to hate certain songs or TV shows. You got to check it out for yourself, because it really might just be your thing. There's a couple of movies I've talked about on at a couple different times on this podcast where they just mean that much to me. And when I tell people, what it's like my 3rd favorite movie of all time, and they're like, really, that one? I'm like, yeah, man, I don't know what to tell you. This is me. We're all different people. So it's going to catch different people in different ways. So No Doubt, I I remember that summer that Don't Speak came out, which really, I think, put them on the map. That was a real huge hit in the mid to late 90s. Because I was riding around with my dad in the summertime. So we were in the truck quite a bit. And it was one of those songs, like every 40 minutes, it would come back around. You're like, oh, this one again. So you love it, love it, love it. And then there's a little bit of burnout. You're like, okay, I've heard it too much. And then you have to put it away for a bit. And then it comes back and you're like, oh, no, it's great. I still love this song. So No Doubt is a great pick at number 5.
That's interesting that you say that, because I had my niece with me not long ago. And she's kind of just at the age where she's starting to develop her own taste in music, aside from what her parents listen to. And I was listening to No Doubt, and she was just like, oh, that, she commented on what a cool voice, and I had the CD with, because I'm old school. I still listen to CDs with the album cover and the booklet, and she commented on Gwen Stefani and how cool and stunning she is. So,
well, the 90s are back. I don't know if you have seen this out and about, in public, but I work in education, so I'm in schools quite a bit, and I see the kids, and they're wearing their baggy holey jeans. They've got their flannel tops and oversized concert tees, and the
combat boots,
the Doc Martens. Like the 90s are back in a big way. So it wouldn't surprise me if maybe some of those hits come back around, especially with how TikTok is. Say what you want about social media and apps. They are definitely a time suck, and they can be dangerous. But if you can get the new generation or the young generation to appreciate good music through a TikTok trend, if you can get them to find out about AC/DC or the Bee Gees or whoever, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, Fleetwood Mac recently became a thing again because
that was huge.
Was that a TikTok video?
Guy just sipping on cranberry juice and listening to Dreams or whatever.
Right.
It was huge.
Yeah, and you couldn't ask for more than this generation of kids to be able to appreciate some of that classic good music.
Yeah. Well, my number 5 for you, I'm guessing probably ranks a little higher on your list, just given with what I can see behind your my number 5 is Nirvana. And
Nirvana.
yeah, I've got Nirvana at number 5. I could see them ranking higher for quite a few people when it comes to 90s bands and specifically 90s rock. I just have a few that are just a little more, mean a little more to me. And but that's not to say they're just all-time great. You know, out of all the grunge acts that are still waiting to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I just recently taped an episode for that about who should be in the Rock Hall. You know, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. There's quite a few that aren't in. They're still waiting.
Sure.
Nirvana, rightfully so, inducted. You know, the lore and mystique of Kurt Cobain and, you know, the 27 Club. Dave Grohl, you know, the preamble to his Foo Fighter days. They spurred a new generation of music. You know, you listen to heavy metal and hard rock in the 80s and it had different twists and turns, but when 91 came around and Nevermind came out and you hear that rocking Smells Like Teen Spirit just penetrated the US and the airwaves, music in that capacity never sounded the same. You know, they changed the script, and still to this day, you can turn on rock radio and hear, you know, Come As You Are, you know, Lithium. There's just so many great songs. The radio hits, the deep cuts. It's just adds to the tragedy that we lost Kurt as early as we did, because I think they would still be putting out great music. Maybe they would have broken up. Maybe they would have gotten back together. But I guarantee you they'd still rock out and they'd be a great show. And it sucks that we don't get to see them live.
Yeah, I would agree with that last point. Sucks that we don't get to see him live. There's a Nirvana tribute band that comes to the Vogue occasionally, and the lead singer kind of looks like Kurt Cobain. He actually sounds quite a bit like him. I have not checked him out. I had planned on going shortly after the pandemic, but then kind of, I couldn't find anybody to go with me. And
let me know. I'll go.
Okay, all right, sounds good. But yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying about Nirvana, except for the 5th place placement. But we'll get to that whenever.
Sure. Whenever. A little foreshadowing.
If and when, right? If they make it into my list.
Right. Yeah.
Higher placement.
We'll see. We'll see there. All right. We had No Doubt at number 5. Who do we got at number 4?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So I had a really hard time with this because there are a lot of artists who I really, really like. And there are a lot of songs that I really, really like. For example, every time Creep from Radiohead comes on, it doesn't matter if it's -10 out. I've got to roll the windows down, open the sunroof, and just jam out. I love that song so much. I've actually said this to friends before, like if I were a musician, if I had a good voice, I would be jealous of Radiohead because I didn't write that song. I love that song so much. Just cool, original. And I don't know who the lead singer of Radiohead is, but as a vocalist, he's
Tom York.
Okay, so he's very unique. I knew it was Tom. I couldn't think of the last name. But I don't know enough Radiohead music to put them in this top 5. And the same could be said for, I really like a handful of 9 Inch Nails songs. I like 9 Inch Nails Hurt, and especially their live performances of that song. I know that Johnny Cash redid it, and I don't think Johnny Cash did that song any justice. Trent Reznor, I get surprised because I'm like, kind of took a really good song and made it, and I don't have a problem with Johnny Cash. I like Johnny Cash, but he just took a really good song and made it kind of a snooze fest. Right.
Wow. That's why I love doing this show.
Popular opinion.
That's why I love doing this show. Because I love that version. I like the 9 Inch Nails version a lot too. But
do you?
Oh wow, I love that. That's interesting.
And it's not that I don't like cover tunes, and I think it's super cool that Johnny Cash, as you know, respected and famous as he is, as accomplished as he was, that he would almost in a way lower himself to cover a Nine Inch Nails songs, because really, who is not Nine Inch Nails compared to Johnny Cash? But I didn't love what he did with it. Usually, if that song comes on and it's the Johnny Cash version, I'll usually change it because it does nothing for me. And that's why my family and my friends say I have sucky taste in music. Okay.
I wouldn't see, and maybe that's the difference. I wouldn't say that's a sucky thing. I would say, oh, that's fascinating to me. Also, because I can't stand Radiohead. Like, I have a big distaste for their sound, and I understand that there are people who love their music, and that's fine.
And you hate the song "Creep" too?
Yeah.
Arno Police.
There's just something about the electric. When I listen to Radiohead, it sounds like computers are fighting, and I just can't get into it as much. But that doesn't mean I can't appreciate that other people, that's their jam, you know.
Wait a minute, isn't there a really cool guitar riff? That's part of the reason why I like the song.
Oh yeah, no, there's definitely like music to it. I just
okay.
Yeah, it's just not my thing.
They're a band from the UK, are they not?
That sounds right.
Do you remember when Oasis came out? Well, you probably don't because you're younger, but Oasis came out and they thought they were going to be as big as the Beatles.
They'd have to stop fighting with each other to get through a whole set.
They had some good songs, and they had some really good songs. Yeah. But as a whole, I felt like they were mediocre at best. They were way too confident for no reason. Anyway, I'll digress.
Yeah, they fell into college rock for me because that's when I first heard Champagne Supernova. That's when I first heard Wonderwall, and it kind of like they're like the bridge into that world of music, and then you find out there's better stuff. I mean, not to knock their stuff, but it's style over substance for me, and there's not much beyond that when it comes to those guys. So, all right, so who do you have at number 4?
Okay, so who do I have at number 4? I'm probably can I do like a hybrid of Soundgarden and Chris Cornell? Chris Cornell didn't come out till later as a solo artist, but man, does he. Oh, and Temple of the Dog. I was have you ever heard of Bynum Steakhouse? It's
sure.
I believe there's a location in Martinsville. There's one on the south side too. And like Troy, Meridian area. Great food, but I ate there for the first time not long ago, and it was just one alternative rock song after another. And there was also Chris Cornell solo. What was he singing? I know that he remade Nothing Compares to You, French, Sinead O'Connor. Gosh, he remade Patience by Guns N' Roses, something else. I'll think of it hopefully before the end of this conversation. He's just such a like unique, strong vocalist. I loved him in Temple of the Dogs. There's this song called Call Me a Dog, and if I could sing, I would sing the part to you, but it's just, I listened to it over and over again, and just, wow. And that's another one of the tragic, he's not a member of the 27 Club, but recently took his own life. And it's just like, how could somebody with who offers so much to the world?
I know what you mean. And it's interesting that, we talked a little bit earlier about grunge and kind of the lack of respect that they have in the rock world. A lot of bands try to copy that sound. They try to copy that formula, but out of the same area of the world, in this like one state or two state area, you had just iconic vocalists in Eddie Vedder, Kurt Cobain, and Chris Cornell. And you put Scott
Stanley too, from Alice in Chains.
We'll get to Lane. Lane, but he's definitely in that mix too. You can't duplicate that. When you hear a lot of the music we're talking about now in the 90s led or bridged into the 2000s, and you kind of can't tell some of the bands apart, or at least I know I can't. And some of the 80s hair metal, I'm like, is that Rat? Is that Cinderella? Like, it takes you a second to remember who it is. But their vocalists are just so distinct. Like, when you hear Chris Cornell, you immediately know that that's Soundgarden or his solo work. Or, you know, if you hear Hunger Strike on the radio, that's Temple of the Dog. Incredible vocals that are timeless, because I think all vocalists that have that range and that depth of talent are timeless. I think that's what sets them apart. That's what makes them so special, you know, and Soundgarden is a part of that, you know, absolutely.
Yeah. Can't say enough great things about Soundgarden, Temple of the Dogs, and I actually really liked a lot of Chris Cornell's solo work.
The Bond theme for Casino Royale, You Know My Name, I think is the name of it. Like, that's like my favorite Bond theme. That song is incredible.
Is that Chris Cornell?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and his death really came as a surprise. And think about it, all of these early 90s artists, like, who is left standing? Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins, Courtney Love, Eddie Vedder. Eddie Vedder seems like a pretty normal. I'm not all that surprised about Eddie Vedder. But like Courtney Love, who would have thought Courtney Love would
she'd outlast them all?
Yeah. Right. So she's on my bucket list, and we'll more on that here in a bit, but she's on my bucket list of people I want to see perform live.
So my number 4 for you is a little bit of a departure from this early 90s that we've been talking about. Definitely what some would probably consider to be bubblegum rock radio type. But when they burst on the scene in, I want to say 98, was when they like really hit it big with radio hits. It was just a great sound, and I got to see them a little later on. This was several years ago now, but it was obviously after their mainstream success, and they put on an incredible show. The Goo Goo Dolls. They just have, you know, the Iris came out. It was part of the City of Angels soundtrack, and it was a huge music video, huge #1 hit on Top 40 Radio. But Slide, Black Balloon, Broadway, you know, Broadway is Dark Tonight. Those are the big radio hits, the ones that everybody knows, but they have so much depth of sound that I never like to relegate them to like the radio darlings or the pop rock alternative type stuff, and maybe they are. It doesn't matter to me. They're just really, really good.
You forgot to mention Name.
And Name was huge.
And that was pretty early 90s. Okay, so a couple things about Goo Goo Dolls. First of all, I like that you said Goo Goo Dolls, because at least somebody is saying it, and I didn't want it to be me. Why? Because back when I was a teenager growing up in Brown County, we listened to hard stuff, you know, like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Tool, even.
Yeah.
Alice in Chains. And so Goo Goo Dolls was kind of considered, when you're in middle school and you just want to do what everybody else is doing, that's kind of lame. That's the stuff that you like on the down low. But secretly, I've always really loved Goo Goo Dolls and enjoy them a lot. I talk about what motivates me to go that extra mile when I'm working out. Goo Goo Dolls is a huge motivator. Johnny, how do you say his last name?
Resnick.
He has a gorgeous voice, and they're also very like normal. Like, that's something you could listen to with your parents. It's something that you could listen to with your younger nieces and nephews without having to like, oh, just disregard this bad word or whatever message he's trying to say here. So I really like Goo Goo Dolls. And also I've seen Goo Goo Dolls live. So back when Bush was a thing, remember Gavin Rossdale?
Oh yeah.
So Bush was a thing when they were starting out. They were on tour, and Goo Goo Dolls and No Doubt was pretty new on the scene, were opening up for Bush. And so because I went to the Bush concert, I got to see Goo Goo Dolls, which was just an added bonus. And also, I mentioned that I met Gwen Stefani. So this is back before cell phones and all of that. My mom dropped us off in Brown County at Assembly Hall for the concert. And she goes to pick us up that evening when the concert's over, but I think we were at the wrong entrance. And I'm just thinking, oh great, mom didn't show up. She forgot to pick us up. So we're just kind of hanging around. We make our way toward where the tour bus area is. And there's this long line of people wanting to meet Gavin Rossdale from Bush. And we didn't get to meet Gavin, but we did get to meet Gwen Stefani from No Doubt. And that's when I got her.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. That's pretty, I would say, pretty common in the country world too. Coming from country radio, you know, obviously you have your headliners, your Luke Bryans, your Carrie Underwoods, your Jason Aldeans. But, you know, the opener and, you know, the support act, you know, that's where you can really see who you can become fans of them early on. Country radio and country music in general, there's a lot of grassroots fandom. Like, oh, I remember when he was, you know, playing to 8 people at the county fair and nobody knew who he was. Now look at him. I think there's an element of that to rock as well. You know, like there was a time when, you know, Metallica opened for somebody. There was a time when No Doubt was opening for somebody else. And they all get their start. To be able to have that, you know, to get kind of in on the ground floor of that fandom is really cool.
Sure. Yeah. It was a great show from what I remember a long time ago. I feel like I'm dating myself with a lot of it, but I mean, we're talking about 90s, and I'm primarily focusing on early 90s, and that was a long time ago.
Yeah, that's all right though.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got No Doubt. We've got Sound. I usually don't allow this, but that's all right. Soundgarden / Chris Cornell / Temple of the Dog. Elizabeth, who do you got at number 3?
Number 3. Okay, so this used to be my number 1 for the longest time. And so you're approaching your top 5 from a very musically analytical standpoint, and mine is not quite that thoughtful.
You're just leading with your heart. I love it.
So what I hear, I like that. I don't exactly have the words to know why. I just do. Pearl Jam.
Number 3, Pearl Jam. Okay, tell me about it.
This is so, I know I'm making myself look terrible by saying this, but I used to have the biggest crush on Eddie Vedder. And I feel like, who didn't at that time, right? He's a handsome dude. Thought that one day I was going to marry him. But because I was so interested in him, I also became interested in his music. And I don't really like, for example, if Alive, one of their biggest hits, plays on the radio, I usually change it. I don't like a lot of their radio stuff. I kind of like Even Flow a little bit. I like Jeremy maybe a little bit better than that. But I like some of the stuff that you don't necessarily hear.
That's David showing up again. That popular mainstream stuff you can keep. I want the deep cuts.
Well, I mean, okay, but again, it's really just,
it's what you like.
I like that. I can't really pinpoint why. I like Crazy Mary. There's a song off their Verses album, which is their second studio album, called Indifference. Pearl Jam is very easy listening. You want to just chill and be mellow. Pearl Jam is sort of my go-to band for that. I don't really like a lot of their hard stuff, as hard as you can get for being Pearl Jam. But they do have a lot of Black that gets a lot of radio play. I think that's a beautiful song. Oh my gosh. I used to listen to that song on repeat, and I shared a bedroom with my 3 sisters actually. And so, you know, I have my CD player and okay, it's time for bed, put on Black and just hit repeat and over it. You know, the
wow, yeah,
over and over. And they're just like, my family, they call me Eli. Eli, turn that off. I can't take that song anymore. Let me show you something from my collection that has to do with Pearl Jam. This is how many, when you listen to that song on repeat, this is how many 10 albums you need to have. Because, CDs get scratched up. So when it gets scratched up, you got to replace it.
Mm-hmm.
You should see my Pearl Jam collection. Here's another example. This is an import. I don't know if you can see it well.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
This is an import, and he's singing Doors, Break On Through, Roadhouse Blues. He's singing some Neil Young, Baba O'Reilly. At the time, I brought this to school. My, what do they call them? Not Walkmans. Were Walkmans CD?
Yeah, disc player,
okay.
disc man.
But this is the type of thing, you wouldn't just put this in your backpack. You wanted to put it on top of your book so that everyone could see you got an import. It's a double disc import. So I really like I really like Pearl Jam. I've seen them in concert probably 3 or 4 times. Kind of stopped listening to them maybe after their binaural CD. And
I was going to ask why they went from number 1. They tumbled a little bit.
Well, part of the reason was superficial. I started liking Pearl Jam because I had the hots for Eddie Vedder, I think
then you grew out of that a little bit.
Right. I'd still take them.
Sure.
But I don't know. I guess maybe it's listening to my favorite song Black on repeat for so long. Now it's I hear it and sometimes I'll turn it up, but it's I've heard that song a gazillion times. Maybe it's just a matter of growing up, and we'll kind of get to what I like about my number 1 and why they're still really like Pearl Jam, but what I like about them versus.
Sure. It's like Shawshank Redemption on TNT. You've watched it so many times. It's is it still my favorite movie? I've seen it too much now that I feel like it kind of tainted it a little bit.
Yeah.
No, exactly. I know exactly what you mean. Okay. Strong 3. My number 3 for you is, let me get back in here. So I had Nirvana at number 5. I had Goo Goo Dolls at number 4. My number 3 might be a controversial pick. I don't know. It's partly that bridge that I was talking about earlier. I feel like this band was a bridge from the early punk sound into what became pop punk in the early to mid 2000s. But starting in 94 up until now, there's just something about Green Day that connects with me in such a great way. The best way I can put it, and I try not to be too analytical here for you, this is more coming from the heart. Green Day sounds like summer vacation. When I hear Holiday, when I hear American Idiot, and I know that's 2000s, but still, when I hear Brain Stew, when I hear the whole Dookie album front to back, it sounds like summer break. It sounds like skateboarding. It sounds like sunshine, shorts, outside, truant, not being where you're supposed to be. The best time of your life, riding around with friends, cranking the radio up to 11. It's Green Day. I love so much about their sound and how they make me feel. They made me feel that way in high school, and I'm, approaching my mid 30s now, and they still make me feel like I can be 16 again. And I love that feeling.
That's funny. You say Dookie, the way it made you feel. Sunshine. You describe Dookie as sunshine. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody describe Dookie as sunshine, but that's kind of a fun album name too, isn't it?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
And I was laughing whenever you said Green Day because, okay, so I just confessed my undying love for Eddie Vedder. My sister Bag, she loved Billy Joe Armstrong.
Yep.
and she used to sign her name Rebecca Ann Armstrong.
Wow.
Because she was going to marry Green Day's lead singer. They are fun. And Longview, that's a fun song.
Welcome to
I
Paradise.
love the way it starts off with the bass. Yeah, I Green Day is there was a point I remember in middle school where if you like Green Day, you were not cool because that's not real punk rock. And they're Americans, but they fake British accents. Who cares? It's fun. Sometimes you just want to listen to things that are fun to listen to and don't give it a whole lot of thought.
Well, and don't get me wrong, like I completely agree. My favorite band of all time is Metallica, and I purposefully didn't choose them for this list because they've been around since '81, but not a lot of people heard those first 4 albums. They didn't become global superstars until '91 with the Black Album. So you could probably make the case for Metallica being a '90s band, but I didn't do that. I was going to be true, and I was going to appreciate our work here today. But you talk about intricate music structure and the melodies and just the way that they shift heavy metal with hard rock with, they came out with a symphony and Metallica album where they played with the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra. Like they're able to do a lot of really intricate, complex stuff. And then you got Green Day, which is just like, okay, we're going to play 3 chords of this song over and over and over again and just like yell. Like sometimes you want that. And I can't stand punk. Like when I hear like old G.G. Allen or the Sex Pistols or the Clash or any of that type of 80s punk sound, the Ramones, I thought were okay, but really repetitive. I didn't like the Ramones, and I always knew to stay away from the girl that liked the Ramones because she was going to be a headache. I learned that early on. If there's a Ramones pin on her sweater or on her book bag, run. But Green Day just had that fun feel. They were the bridge from that early stuff into what we got from like Panic at the Disco and Fall Out Boy and that stuff that we got in the 2000s, which has
Charlotte, is that
Good Charlotte was Good Charlotte, I think. Yeah, they were probably in between. Like Green Day came really hit hard in the early mid 90s. 94, I think, is when they really hit. Good Charlotte was like 98, 99.
Or the Woodstock
99.
Yes.
Yeah,
I remember that. It was
Good
a little
Charlotte.
more violent than the original.
Just a little bit, yeah. Well, when you get like Kid Rock and Limp Bizkit and Chili Peppers, you're gonna get some crazy stuff going on.
Don't get me started on Kid Rock. Do you like Kid Rock?
No, I mean, I remember
if you did, you would not admit to it.
No, I would. Don't get me wrong. If I hear "Ba What Da Ba,"
and
it's like up really loud, like "Ba What Da Ba," like I'll get into it. But do I see Kid Rock out? Do I go see him live? Like, no, not really. But he's got the late 90s. That's a generational thing. I was like 12, 13, 14 when that stuff hit, and it was just pure like white trash testosterone. Like, yeah, cowboy. I'll get into it. I don't care.
Ba What Da Ba is really fun at the gym. And that, like, if I'm like, oh, I can't, like, I'm about to give up. Okay, Ba What Da Ba. And then all of a sudden I'm running faster than I've ever ran before. But it's like, I don't want anybody to see that I am listening to this, or because I tend to sing also when I'm jogging. And so, yeah, that's just not a socially acceptable thing to be singing.
I hope to God someday we get a video of Elizabeth Choi working out, blaring, singing Kid Rock. That will break the internet.
Not gonna happen.
Okay, so I had Green Day at number 3. You had Pearl Jam. We are approaching our top 2. I have a feeling I know we're gonna get to, but
gosh.
Yeah, who do we have in number 2 for you?
I am always gonna love Hole, no matter how old I get, and your perspective changes. So when I was in middle school, Courtney Love, wow, she was cool, she was raw, she didn't care, she didn't give an F about anything. She said whatever she wanted to say. She was loud, she screamed, she's angry. And so that is what I wanted to aspire to be. And now that I'm older, I've got my little collection behind me. I watched this montage of Heck.
Yep.
And so it just kind of gives you an intimate look at the life of Kurt Cobain, and she's obviously Kurt's widow. There was some home video of Kurt and Courtney with their daughter, who was just a baby at the time, an infant, and they were high as a kite. I look at that now, I'm older, and it just kind of, sorry if you can hear the sirens, there's a fire station nearby.
Oh, that's all right.
But the shot of them like bouncing around their house high as a kite, and I'm just like concerned for their daughter, like parents don't do that. So I mean, obviously that's not cool, but I still love Hole. I think that they really don't get enough credit for their good work. They have two very different studio albums. Live Through This has very much a Nirvana sound. A lot of people say Kurt Cobain must have written that album. Of course, it was released maybe a week after his death. Did very well commercially. I do hear sort of a Kurt Cobain, Nirvana inspiration behind that album, but many of those songs, they were songs that she had written before Kurt. So I really like a lot of the content. She's very much sort of a feminist and doesn't sort of mince words. She straight to the point in her own sort of demented mind. And then she came out with Celebrity Skin in the late 90s. And that was more of a pop, a different side of Courtney Love. And of course, that was after she started doing movies and was sort of embraced by Hollywood. And you saw her kind of ditch her sort of grunge baby doll, smeared lipstick, smeared eyeliner. All of a sudden, she's getting her hair and makeup done and waltzing around in designer gowns. So she kind of cleaned up her look, and it almost seemed like she cleaned up her music a little bit too. And surprisingly, I really liked a sort of as pop as you can be if you're Courtney Love album from Hole.
Which one had Make Me Over?
That's Celebrity Skin, and the song is actually called Celebrity Skin.
Is that I'm a big fan of that.
Did you watch the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
There was a commercial. What is the artist name? See, I'm not good with the new stuff. Some really big pop artist. There was a commercial, some really big pop artists sang that song. They changed the words slightly. So that was kind of cool that's an older song and one that was never really, I mean, it was popular for the time, but didn't really stand the test of time. It's not one that you hear nowadays. And actually, I was going to ask you that you never hear Hole on the radio. Is that because people hate Hole, or is it because radio stations hate to play Hole, or why don't you hear Garbage and you hear like Alanis Morissette? No, it's not exactly the same thing, but why don't you hear Hole on the radio? Why do radio stations not play Hole?
My guess is most radio is data driven and statistics driven. And so there's a lot of testing and then retesting and then testing again. You can get pretty much to the minute data on who's punching in and punching out. My guess is that when they've tested the radio songs from Hole, they don't test well and then they don't get played. The other thing you're going to see is we're kind of in a transitional period when it comes to rock radio, where classic rock radio is starting to fade out or phase out the late 60s, early 70s. And they're going to start incorporating Nirvana, Green Day, early Foo Fighters. Like classic rock is kind of shifting to where it's
classic
not so
rock
much.
Is what we grew up listening to. Now, how old does that make you feel?
It's not great. And there's so little active rock now. Like, when you look at the pantheon of the biggest names in music right now, and you look at top 40 specifically, a lot of hip hop, a lot of pop, there's some country, Luke Combs is really blown up. Morgan Wallen is really blown up. There's a little bit of crossover, like Kelsey Ballerini's pop and country, so, and you have your Taylor Swift, you have your Ariana Grande's, you have your Lil Nas X, you have Justin Bieber. I mean, it takes a long time before you get to like, oh yeah, there's Godsmack is still doing music. 3 Days Grace, Breaking Benjamin, that era of like 2000s rock, there's just been a bit of a lull where it hasn't really had a home. And usually you're going to pair that 90s hard rock, that alternative rock with that. So I think you've got kind of just a gap where it's not quite ready to put that music on classic rock radio yet. And you don't have as much active rock anymore. Like active rock stations now become alt stations, and now they're playing Who Did Heathens. This is going to bother me.
Oh, please don't make it
21 Pilots.
Okay, that was the what was that movie? Suicide Squad.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot of that type of rock on alternative stations. Like X103 became Alt 103. So I will say they probably don't play Hole, because the data doesn't suggest that they should. That's
just say it. Nobody likes Hole. You have sucky taste in music, Elizabeth.
That's not what I'm saying at all. That's not what I'm saying. I think it's also more so they don't necessarily have a home for it. There probably aren't a lot of stations that would make sense for it to be. It doesn't fit in with what the rest of the station is.
Yeah. I believe the Lollapalooza tour back in probably 95 made a stop in Indy. And I think I remember, don't quote me on this, but Hole was supposed to be part of that lineup. And they bailed after all the promotion that went into it last minute. And so I remember calling X103 to request a song back in the day. And they said, we don't play her anymore. And I've never heard Hole on the radio since. They had a lot of good music. And even back then when they were relevant, they still didn't play Hole. And I take that back. Maybe they did play a little bit of Hole in the late 90s when Celebrity Skin came out.
Well, and it's going to be reactionary. You know, if the fan base more or less turns on an artist, you're not going to play that artist, you know, because you're just asking for people to punch out, and you're not in the business of that. You know, nope. Obviously we're both from a media background. You're just trying to get more and more people into the pool all the time and keep them there for as long as you can. So
did I mention, Kash, that you're making me laugh because you say we're not in the business of having people tune out. So when I was in college at Ball State, WCRD, our radio station, student run, my roommate at the time and she thought it sounded like fun. Let's be radio DJs. Let's do, they were always looking for volunteers at the student run station. So we agreed to it. And the time you could bring CDs, I would go to the library and pick out CDs, or you could play digital music as well. But I'd go to the library and pick out CDs, and I didn't have a format, which really enraged my roommate. But I played when I felt like it, because I'm very much what I feel like when it comes to music. And so it might be country, and then I might be listening to the Pixies after that, and then it might be some like gangster rap. I didn't care. I just wanted to listen to what I wanted to listen to. I had the lowest rated radio show at the time on campus. So
it's all those hipster pigs, man. You're like, I just like what I like. That's the risk you can run.
Is that hipster to just play what you like, or is that just kind of being all over the place?
No, I think that's kind of being original, honestly. Hipster is where you really just like obscure just because it's obscure, and you liked it before anybody else knew what it was. That's more of just being an original. And I think more people should be more unapologetic when it comes to what they like. You know, I just watched a movie last night, Nightmare Alley, with Bradley Cooper, Cate Blanchett. It's up for Best Picture at the Oscars, and I saw a bunch of people saying how great it was online. I'm like, this movie sucked. Like, I thought it was long and boring and overrated, and I'm cool with that. Like, and people want to take shots at the Marvel franchises. Like, that's cool. I like a lot of the Marvel stuff. Like, both things can exist. We can have our indie films that maybe have a deeper message and don't make a lot of sense on the surface. and you can have your fast food version of movies, which is the Marvel stuff. You can have both and enjoy both.
Now you're making me
music is
feel
the same.
better. I'm taking my nieces to go see Jennifer Lopez's, I think it's called Marry Me, her new movie. We're gonna go see that tonight.
Is it like a rom-com?
Yeah. Gonna be dreadful, but I'm kind of excited to see it. I also don't have, along with not having great taste in music, I probably don't have the best taste in movies either.
Oh,
And
I'm smelling another episode. We're gonna do our top 5 guilty pleasure movies.
You're telling me it's okay to be me. This is kind of like therapy too.
Oh, don't say that. I'll get in trouble practicing without a license. I don't want that.
Okay.
Okay, my number 2 for you. I couldn't ignore it. I feel like they did a lot of their stuff has come post 90s, but they hit the stage in 90s, in the mid 90s, and they really hit mainstream success with their first studio album in 98. And they're too special to me to not include. So my number 2 is Godsmack. They came out in 98 with the self-titled debut Godsmack. And the first time I heard Voodoo, first time I heard that song, my brother Mark, he's always been onto stuff before me. He was the first one to get into Metallica. He was the first one to, you might want to check this band out. I'm like, nah. I want to listen to Nelly and Lil Bow Wow and all that other 90s hip hop stuff.
Little Bow Wow?
Oh, yeah, that's my age. So he turned on, we were in his bedroom, playing video games or whatever, and he turns on Voodoo, and those drums start kicking in like it sounds like they're in the depths of the jungle. And then wow, that grinding guitar comes in, and you hear Sully Erna's voice, and you're like, he's not James Hetfield from Metallica, but he's pretty damn close. And they have their distinct sound. And I got to see them open for Metallica in 2004 with my Uncle Phil, who's like an older brother to me. He got a high five from James Hetfield from Metallica. He got a high five from Sully Erna from Godsmack. We got guitar picks. It's one of those things it's a part of our DNA that we got to see them live in concert. Incredible music. They continue to put out good music, which is awesome. They've got the longevity, but they really shaped that sound for me back in the day.
I don't really have any opinions. I've never really listened to their music, but I checked out after about mid 90s. So what is the meaning behind their name? Do you know?
Yes.
You're Googling it.
I am Googling it because I know it, but I don't know it. I remember reading it. This is great podcasting, me looking stuff up. Name, origin. So the band's name, according to Merrill in the Smack This DVD, is taken from the I feel like a total fraud right now. They took their name from the Alice in Chains song Godsmack.
Oh, okay. And I know I think I have a good idea where you're going with your number 1. Okay, so this is probably taking this podcast in a different direction. There are certain things that I will not listen to, and certain songs I will not listen to, and that could be from Pearl Jam, it could be from Hole, it could be from Nirvana, it could be from Alice in Chains, because I'm a woman of faith, believe in the Bible, God-fearing Christian, and so some of those things push my own moral boundaries.
Oh, and yeah. So, I could see that. The song Bad Religion. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're even as a kid growing up when, too cool for school and listen to the loudest things. And I'm not like offended by swear words or anything like that. I in everything, our music, our movies, comes out of my mouth more often than I'd like to admit. Not for the sake of the podcast, but when you're kind of pushing my religious moral boundaries, that's where it's a pretty distinct line in the sand for me. So and We haven't really talked about Alice in Chains a whole lot. I thought Lane Stanley was very talented. We'll get to that. I have a feeling in your number one, but very talented, great voice, and there are a lot of songs there that I really like. They're just like I said, even with like a Nirvana, I'm like, I don't know if I can really listen to that and feel good about myself. So
sure, no, I get that. That I've had this argument with a former coworker multiple times. She's the biggest Chris Cornell fan in the world. Her name's Jan. Great lady. And we talked because she's a lyrics person. Like she'll internalize the words, and lyrics have great meaning for her. And I am kind of the opposite. I know there are words there, and I obviously know them because I can sing along, but I do not internalize any messaging. Like when I hear after the fact, like a word or a song means, oh, that song's about this. And you're like, what? Okay, I didn't get that at all. I just like the guitar, I like the melody, and I just sing the words because those are the words. But I can definitely see where if you do internalize the messaging, where you hear certain messaging that you're like, that doesn't really jive with what I've got going personally, makes all the sense in the world. I get that.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm kind of like you say, sometimes you want to listen to something because it's fun. Sometimes you want to listen to something because it's complicated, or it speaks to you in one way or another, or you like the melody, or how intricate the music is put together. And I'm not speaking from somebody who's techie when it comes to music. But when it comes to lyrics, sometimes I'm listening to a song that I didn't necessarily like before, and I hear lyrics and I'm like, oh, that really spoke to me. And then all of a sudden I like the song. That happened with a Kenny Chesney song recently. And also a Jim Blossom song. Sometimes I'm just listening to something and it's a funny song, and I don't care about the lyrics. There's a lot of Nirvana whole stuff, Alice in Chains, that's overly complicated, and it's like, what is he even talking about, you know? But as long, like, and so I'm pretty much okay with about anything, as long as it's not crossing that moral boundary for me.
Sure. Especially the real like overt stuff, like, oh, this is pretty obvious. This is like,
I won't, we'll put it this way, I'm not listening to Marilyn Manson. Although he did do a pretty wickedly cool version of Sweet Dreams. But it also, that's not a song you want to listen to if you're home alone for the night. And
no, it's like you're in the middle of a horror movie. All of this,
right. That was an interesting time for music too, by the way. When bands like that came out, I was in high school, and I remember there were guys who were wearing like pantyhose. One guy came to school dressed in a nun outfit and ripped up a Bible. And a lot of it was just, hey, I want attention. Pay attention to me, please. But that was just, I remember you had the jocks who were like, who are these? They called them the Thrasher kids. Who are these Thrasher kids? And
Thrasher kids.
Why did we let them in our school? And then they're coming, and there was a huge group of them too. Oddly enough, they hung out in the church parking lot there in Nashville. That was their hangout spot. So you can imagine the
rebellion against
makeup
the
and the nun costume and
all right, so we've got No Doubt, we've got Soundgarden, Chris Cornell, Temple of the Dog, we've got Pearl Jam, we have Hole. It's an impressive top five. You are really hugging that early 90s, but still, that's your era. What do we have at number one?
Well, can we get a drum roll? I'm gonna go with Kurt's. His head just detached from his body. I like Nirvana.
Okay, he's fixed. Good. Nirvana number one.
I'm a huge Nirvana fan, and Nirvana is not easy listening. Overly complicated, sort of a deranged artist. He was not right in the head. I think he was well known that he struggled with drug addiction, primarily heroin. I think that played a role in his twisted thoughts, but on paper, it made for some great music. I like them because they are original, and I believe that they were not just, okay, so you had Alice in Chains was sort of a hair band, and then grunge became a thing, and then they kind of became a grunge band. And then Pearl Jam had a certain sound. They were in a variety of bands before Pearl Jam, Mookie Blaylock, and then Temple of the Dog, and still kind of playing with their sound. I feel like Nirvana was always just Nirvana. They had bands that they really liked, bands that they were heavily influenced by, the Pixies, Lead Belly, and they very much into punk rock and just sort of invented their own sound. And they weren't playing by anybody's rules. When Kurt Cobain had enough with the demands of record executives and do this, don't do that, be more like this, be less like this, he just gave them the middle finger, F you, I'm going to do my thing. And I think that it translated really well in the studio. And he was an interesting lyricist. A lot of his stuff you listen to and you're just kind of like, what did he mean by any of that? And some of it remains to be known. But I like them because, and their Unplugged album, that was sort of easy listening, but they were not easy listening. And I think that you do have to be in a certain kind of mood. They're loud, and they are angry, and you often hear people say angst when they're talking about Nirvana's music. So they're filled with angst and complicated, but also really simple and, dare I say, beautiful at the same time. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kurt Cobain was an interesting guy, messed up guy, and I think that that's kind of one of the things that set them apart from a lot of the other bands before them and after them and during their time.
Yeah, you can't deny that they changed music in a big way. I've talked with other older coworkers, that were definitely more in the hard rock, hair metal. The 80s was like the pinnacle for them. Mm-hmm. And they really don't like the grunge sound. They kind of resent Nirvana for being because it's not true, but they're portrayed as what killed heavy metal or hair metal or whatever. I'm like, no, it's just, it ran its course. You can only do so much spandex and hairspray before it gets
absolutely
a little sad.
And how much longer, if it wasn't for Nirvana, how much longer would the hair bands have lasted? Maybe a little bit longer, but
yeah, by 88, 89, it already kind of faded out. Motley Crue was about as white hot as you can get in 87 and 88, and that obviously had a short shelf life. Something was going to come around, and it was Nirvana that really put things on the map when it came to especially the Pacific Northwest sound, but grunge is a genre. And then you had people that had the second or third act to their career. I don't know necessarily that it was because of Nirvana that happened, but I'm glad that some bands were able to kind of reinvent and reassess. Aerosmith is a big one that comes to mind. Huge in the 70s, a little bit of a dip in the mid 80s. And then they came out, had a couple of hits in the late 80s with like Dude Looks Like a Lady. Permanent Vacation album was pretty good. And then 93, 94 hits, post the hair metal and the heavy metal era going away. And then this new alternative hard rock sound came along, and all of a sudden Aerosmith's got Crazy and Crying and Angel and all these great songs. And they weren't the only band that was able to do that. And I think you can thank that transition in rock history. A lot of that is rooted in the bands like Nirvana.
Do you feel like Guns N' Roses did a little bit of that? I know they had a certain sound in the 80s, and you've got like Welcome to the Jungle and Axl Rose's hair is all crazy. Not exactly hairband hair, but kind of hairband hair. It was big hair. It was wild. It wasn't as, styled as maybe Guns N' Roses or Motley Crue, Poison type thing, but it was still big and wild, dancing in the video. And then all of a sudden you've got like November Rain and Don't Cry and Patience, where it's like a different kind of Axl. And I know that he really, really wanted to go on tour with Nirvana. And that was kind of the reasoning behind the whole Axl Rose, Kurt Cobain beef, is Kurt Cobain was like, ha ha, you're a joke. I don't respect you or your band or what you guys stand for. And Axl Rose, being the ego that he is, couldn't handle that.
Yeah, and you saw a lot of that a little before, like 91, 92 was when Guns N' Roses and Metallica went on tour. Metallica, another band, like I said, they hit it huge in 91 with the Black Album. That was probably the last great heavy metal album. One of my honorable mentions we can kind of talk about a little bit is Pantera. I was a pretty big Pantera fan. Didn't make my top 5, but they had some good metal sound, but that sound went away. And you saw Axl Rose was, the guys in Metallica were obviously over his crap. They're like, oh, this guy, look, making fun of his writer and how his antics were. Metallica, another band that kind of changed their sound. Obviously, they were the thrashers in the 80s, and then the heavy metal mainstream of 91 with the Black Album. And then Load and Reload came out and they sounded like bluesy. It was bluesy rock. And it's like, what? When did that happen?
They did remake Bob Seger's Turn the Page, didn't they?
They did.
They did a good job with that cover. You're going to, maybe after this is over with, you can kind of send me a timeline, because there is a point where I started listening to some Metallica, and I will, if Metallica is on the radio, I definitely turn that up. But there are, and I don't know if it's certain time frame that I like or just certain songs, because I don't know, this came out, I don't know Metallica well enough to say, this came out this time frame. But there are a handful of Metallica songs that I really like. And I'm wondering if it's from that early to mid 90s.
I'm guessing that's the case. I can send you a couple of the early albums and see what you like, but that's really high pitched vocal thrash speed, like heavy metal. So you gotta really like that to enjoy it. But Nirvana is number one. Again, with the wonderful Shrine, I don't know that there was any surprise there, but it definitely makes sense.
Let me see if I can.
There's so much great stuff back there.
This is my favorite thing to wear. I sometimes wear it to work underneath a suit top. I've had this for a very long, before it became cool to like Nirvana again. And my sister bought me this for my birthday. I think she bought it at American Eagle. Wouldn't Kurt Cobain hate how commercialized? And it's like, oh yeah, already got a rip in it, but I love the t-shirt. This is kind of a back to David. I like most Nirvana songs that play on the radio. I like Teen Spirit. It's a little overplayed, but I like Teen Spirit. I like Heart-Shaped Box. I like All Apologies. I like most of the Unplugged album. I love that we had that before he committed suicide, because that gives you sort of a softer side of Nirvana. But I like some of the stuff that, like, my brother would always jam out to this song called Lounge Jack. That's sort of about jealous girlfriend type thing. He would jam out to that on the way into school. And that's probably to this day, one of my favorite Nirvana songs. I like Sappy. I like Drain You with the weird sort of monkey noises in the background. And I like how sometimes complicated is not good, but for Nirvana, I felt it worked.
Agreed. All right. My number one for you. It's kind of a weird, I got kind of a weird mixed bag for you. I've had Nirvana at 5, Goo Goo Dolls, Green Day, Godsmack at 2. Didn't quite make my top 5. I had Stone Temple Pilots written down, but they got kind of bumped out. Pantera got bumped out. But I knew when I started this list who was going to be number one, probably similar to you, knowing like, all right, I'm going to start here and then kind of reverse engineer my list. But number one, you kind of touched on it a little bit. We've talked about him, and another one of a talent gone too soon, drug addiction being a terrible thing of a lot of these 90s acts. But Alice in Chains, and specifically the sound of Lane Staley's voice and Jerry Cantrell's their vocals together and then his guitar is just an incredible sound. I typically tend to, I think about life in movies. I just have that brain where I'm imagining like this would be a fun movie scene. Like if something's happening in a restaurant, I'm like this would be funny if this was part of a TV show right now, if we had cameras on us or whatever. And so I'm fascinated by soundtracks. I'm fascinated by scores and how music can make you feel. It's, you watch a movie back in the day, like from the 40s or the 50s, and you don't realize how much music has to do with, because there was so many movies back then didn't have music. It was just like watching a play. You're like, this is boring. This is terrible. Why do people think that this is good? And then you turn on a movie now and it's nonstop. It's either, like a Tarantino where it's not original score. It's, pop and rock songs throughout time that gives it the vibe, Pulp Fiction and having the Al Green on in the dusky bar or whatever. Or you've got Hans Zimmer in the Christopher Nolan films, the Pirates of the Caribbean, this epic, music, or the Christopher Nolan, like the Dark Knight or the Interstellar, which has this kind of just this tingling vibe, the percussion. So I like to think of in terms of soundtrack and score when I'm kind of going through life. When you're single with no kids, you can kind of just daydream, you can kind of have that extra time on your hands. And Alice in Chains is definitely mood music. I'm much more in the mood for it when it's like this time of year. It's cold, it's darker, it's a little depressive. But when I hear like Man in the Box, or I hear Rooster, or I hear, these Wood, No Excuses, I can picture different scenes in like a movie trailer of what would be a perfect fit for that song. And the song Don't Follow has got to be the most hopeless, depressing sounding song, but it's so beautiful the way it raps, and the lyrics are just so compelling that anytime Alice in Chains is on, I get sucked into, like when you talk about your workout and some of the songs that get you pumped to get to the end of the workout, I need to get a movie script out. I need to do some writing. I need to get some material or some content created because of the energy that Alice in Chains music gives me. And there's no way they couldn't be my number one.
I like that. Alice in Chains, Lane Stanley, first of all, had just a very uniquely great voice. I think that his voice, his singing ability made even the likes of Kurt Cobain jealous. And first of all, I think it's interesting to think of Alice in Chains was once a hair band, because they are so.
Yeah, that didn't last long at all. It was.
Right, but they are so defined by what they did in the early mid 90s, that I can't think of them. I cannot think of somebody as unique and as much of an individual as Lane Stanley and talented as anything other than what he was in Alice in Chains. Does that make sense? I like Down in a Hole. You said there couldn't be a more depressing song than what?
Don't Follow is to me a
Down in a Hole. How does it get?
That one's, well, it's Alice in Chains. There's a lot of depressing music in the catalog. Down in a Hole is pretty bad, but
I really like Down in a Hole, but don't listen to Down in a Hole if you're already in a very sad mood, because that's going to send you over the top.
The thing I like about Don't Follow perhaps is because it has that change. It's a deeper cut. It's not a radio hit, but it's, living a life full throttle at the bottom of a bottle. I can't remember the exact lyric now. I got to hear it to be able to sing it, but it's just this feeling of hopelessness. And then it kind of brightens up halfway through. And then Jerry Cantrell kind of comes in with this guitar, this key change, and you're like, huh. And it's like watching a season change, like a time lapse kind of. It's the feeling that you get. But the beginning is just so hopeless, and it grows. And I think that's what I latch onto. Down in a Hole is pretty bad.
It is pretty bad. It's still, though, sometimes, because I really like that song, I'll also listen to it when I'm out jogging. But if I need motivation, it is not the song I go to for motivation. And if I'm already feeling kind of bent out of shape, not going to listen to that song. Them Bones.
Oh yeah,
That'll get you
that's a
pumped.
little shake you
Uh-huh.
a little bit.
Yeah,
Angry Chair.
yeah. Wood was in the Singles soundtrack. Was in the Singles movie. Alice in Chains, I think, had a small cameo in that film. Do you remember Singles? You
I
seem like you're
don't.
into. Okay. It
I
was
know.
kind of,
I'm a movie guy, but there's
yeah.
still a lot of stuff I haven't seen.
Rom-com is not your genre though, right? Or is
Uh,
it? You
it
like
depends.
rom-com?
I like everything. I like all genres, but I don't like everything within a genre. So like rom-com for me, um, My Best Friend's Wedding, Crazy Rich Asians.
I didn't like
What?
Crazy Rich Asians.
Oh, I thought it was great. I thought there were going to be a couple more twists. I'm a big fan of the leads though, and I think Constance Wu is amazing. I think Henry Golding's great. The Wedding Planner with Matthew McConaughey and Jennifer
I
Lopez.
just watched that the other day.
It's not a good movie, but I love it. So that can tell you where I either like it or I don't. I mean, I have no rhyme or reason, but
good.
So no, I'm not against rom-coms.
Okay. So there was a rom-com with Matt Dillon, and he wore this really long, grungy wig and stuff like this flannel shirt I'm wearing and combat boots. And he was in a band called Citizens Dick, and Eddie Vedder's in the band. Of course, that's why I watched the movie.
Sure.
But it was the setting was Seattle, early 90s.
Yep.
Alice in Chains. Actually, I do remember the scene. They go to watch a show and Alice in Chains is performing Wood. That's a good song, by the way.
It was in the trailer for the TV show The Punisher.
Wood?
Yeah, it was the Netflix series, the spinoff of Daredevil, The Punisher. And it was the trailer for season 3, maybe season 2 or season 3. And it was just Frank Castle, that character, kicking a bunch of ass, and Wood was
that's
like
kind of random, isn't it?
It is, but it fits. That's what I love so much about score and about soundtrack, is finding that perfect song to fit so that you feel what the character is feeling.
I was recently reading, actually, it's called Cobain Unseen. Let me show you this real quick. This I got for like $5 when I was working as a news reporter in my first market, Zanesville, Ohio. And it's a really neat, I looked it up on eBay. It's like $100 now, but it's got like a lot of personal photos and a lot of his artwork. Cobain was, like I said, a deranged person. I don't know if you can see. Here's the lyrics to Teen Spirit written out on it's like a replica. Anyway, They talk about Alice in Chains and Lane Stanley, and Kurt Cobain, he was pretty cocky, but he had said about bands like Alice in Chains that he really hated how how Nirvana came out with the sound, and all these record executives realized, oh, this is what's selling now. Let's duplicate this. And he felt like they were doing that with Alice in Chains. And here you have this hair band, not even from Seattle. I don't think Alice in Chains was actually from Seattle. Nirvana was not from Seattle. Pearl Jam was not actually from Seattle, but they were marketing it in a way that would lead you to believe that this is a scene in Seattle. And Lane Stanley spoke out about him like, hey, this guy was in a hair band and now he's trying to be one of us. But apparently he actually met Lane Stanley and they probably shot up together, to be honest. But he had said very glowing things about Lane Stanley's voice, and that like he wished he had a voice like that. Lane Stanley was even though he was probably a teenager just trying to be cool, like many of us. We all do silly things and just trying to fit in, probably musically inclined. What was popular when he was growing up was probably hair bands. Hey, I want to do that. But I think that the way that he evolved into sort of a early 90s grunge artist, I don't think it was not authentic. I don't think you can really fake that kind of talents and originality. Maybe you can, but he was definitely a talented dude.
Yeah, I mean, in the band in general, I mean, it's kind of sad the paths that a few of the band members have taken. I think Cantrell's the last one left at this point, but still, lasting power. To this year, 2022, it will be 20 years since Lane Staley died. So
That is hard to believe because he was
time
like one of
flies.
they have a newer lead singer who sounds a lot like him, correct? At least that's what I've heard.
Yeah, they went on tour together. I can't remember the guy's name, and he sounded pretty good. But
Yeah.
that's one of those. It's like Robert Plant from Zeppelin. The guy from Greta Van Fleet comes pretty close, but there's just something about the original that just really kind of
Absolutely.
can't be touched. So who didn't quite make your top 5 list? Let's go ahead and wrap up. Is there anybody that didn't quite, but
Smashing Pumpkins. I love Billy Corgan. I think that he has a really cool, different sort of voice. And I like a lot of their stuff. I talked about Radiohead. It's like a Radiohead song. And I really like that Radiohead song, but it's just one song. So I didn't want to add them to the list. I like a ton of Smashing Pumpkin songs, mainly the stuff that you hear on the radio, but there is this song off of Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness called Muzzle. And it's just about being a sheep, sort of, a follower. And I just like what Billy Corgan does with his voice.
Yeah, that's another one. If a girl has the Smashing Pumpkins pin, stay away, because I could never get into it. It just seems so sad and whiny.
Whiny, I get that.
The whiny, it reminded me of like kind of the Smiths or the Pixies, that the more obscure rock or whatever. But I guess there's one that I kind of enjoy. Maybe it's one of the radio hits too, like 1979. I think is a good song. They've got some stuff that I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's pretty good. But I think it's Corgan himself. I think I might have seen too many interviews with him, and I'm like,
yeah,
this guy,
he was
never
pretty
him.
cocky too. Like he
Yeah.
treated his band like he was the Beatles, and it's like, no, you're not on that level, dude. But
Yeah.
I mean, I do like quite a few Smashing Pumpkin songs. Actually, right before the pandemic, I think they were playing at what's a small venue in downtown Indianapolis, and it's always really expensive.
I think they were at the Field House, weren't they?
No.
They weren't at the Pacers, the Gainbridge
The Murat, maybe?
the old National Center,
Yeah,
which is the Murat.
And they were going to be playing there before the pandemic, and I really wanted to go. And that would have been the first time I got to see them, but then the show was canceled due to COVID. That was at the height of the pandemic. But I get that whiny. Yeah, I understand why you would say that.
I had a couple that were, I would say, are more college rock that didn't quite make it. They are probably more guilty pleasure songs, or bands like you can't let people know that you like Goo Goo Dolls. I call it I used to call it the Backstreet Boy factor. And then I started calling it the Nickelback factor. People want to hate on the boy bands or the girl bands in the late 90s, and they want to hate on Nickelback from the 2000s. But when that song comes on at the bar, or if somebody's karaokeing that song, everybody sings along. They know every single word. So you can hate all you want and try to be cool, but you listen to it and you know it and you like it. So for me, Dave Matthews Band obviously hit in the 90s.
I knew you were going to say that.
They've got some good stuff. I don't like it all, but they also were one. My best friend's wife got me to go to their concert 10 years ago. Seeing them live definitely changed my mind. When you see them,
still do 2 shows per. Okay.
Yeah, and they're coming back this summer. They'll be here I think July 23rd, 24th, or something like that, or maybe in June. But either way, they've got some cool soundtracky type stuff. They had a couple songs that were featured on episodes of House, which is my favorite show. So that was pretty cool. And then just seeing them live was pretty key into be like, oh, they're really good musicians. Like they have some good stuff and some good covers. And then I would also say in that college rock genre would be Hootie and the Blowfish. They didn't have enough for me to get them into the top 5, but Only Want to Be With You, I Go Blind, like they just have some really catchy, fun college rock stuff to their sound that I definitely wanted to give them an honorable mention.
So about Dave Matthews, and then I have a comment about Hootie and the Blowfish, but about Dave Matthews, they're not really too much different than like a Pearl Jam sound, in my opinion. Not like even flow. Like
you just pissed off so many people with that comment.
That's okay. I'm sure that this whole podcast, I've pissed off a lot of people with a variety of my comments, but they're really not that different. However, I've never liked Dave Matthews. I remember being a freshman in college at Ball State, and I just remember that name being thrown at that band name. Oh, I love Dave. Because everyone had that reaction to them, it just made me not want to like them even more.
Yep.
But in reality, they really don't have, their sound is not all that different, I don't think. However, why does he sound so different when he's singing than his actual voice? Like, what is it that he does with his voice? I hate that. Whatever that thing is, he does. I hate that.
I'm not sure. I think what I like about it is they have such varying sound too. There'll be blues, there'll be jazz, there'll be rock, there'll be pop, there'll be ska, there's a lot of different stuff. And like they'll cover a ton of bands. Like they'll cover the Talking Heads, they'll cover a Beatles song, they'll cover whatever. But because, to your point, a bunch of nerds out in a quad tossing a frisbee and hitting hacky sack liked it. Nope, not cool.
Yeah.
But
they are cool because so many people like them. And I think that's pretty awesome that they can still do like 2 performances per stop, and they have a massive tour. I'm sure they make a crap ton of money off of it, and good for them for that.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they're doing just fine. They're doing well.
So about Hootie and the Blowfish, I saw this bumper sticker, and I didn't realize I felt this way about Hootie and the Blowfish until I saw this bumper sticker, but I 110% believed in it, and it said exactly what I was thinking. It said, "Who bought all of those Hootie albums?" Really though,
college kids.
Okay, so what was the album called that was so popular?
Cracked Rear View.
Okay. And it sold an astronomical amount of albums.
Yep.
Who bought them? Because I didn't like them. None of my friends liked them, but somebody was buying their albums because they sold so many. So that pretty much summed up how I felt.
I would say college bros. A lot of Theta Chi's and Sig Eps and Alpha Omegas and Delta Zetas and whatever else. I'm sure bought up all of those copies of wedding DJs, Hold My Hand or Hold Your Hand or whatever it is. Like there's something about them it's just really, and I really like Darius Rucker as a solo act. So when I get to see him in concert and then he breaks out, the medley of the 4 or 5 big Hootie hits, it's pretty great. It's pretty good. So
I understand that. And he is a good solo artist. I like that Wagon Wheel song. I don't listen to a ton of country, but there are some songs that really stick with me, and that one is a good one.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I hope we have inspired people to go and find new music, and hopefully we haven't pissed off too many people. But this was a lot of fun. I think we should do another one. We'll find another fun top 5 for us to do.
Sure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I've had a good time. Thank you for it kind of felt like a venting session where I could just talk, like geek out about music and early 90s stuff, because nobody really wants to hear my opinions on music, but you listened to me without hanging up the Zoom session. So kudos to you for that. It was very nice chatting with you, Kash.
Thank you, dear.